So you have heard a lot today. This morning you heard the best self or best organizational examples. When has your organization been really at its best? What did that look like? What were some characteristics? What contributed to success? Then this afternoon you've heard a lot of stories from practice, from education, from various viewpoints about some potential opportunities ahead. All of those things are things that can help to inform a workforce development plan for Kansas. What we would very much like and very much need your input on now is to help us inform that plan by helping us to synthesize from your viewpoint, from your perspective, your experiences every day, the questions, and there's on the final page of your handout, they're listed here. So the first is the magic wand question. If you had all of everything you need, or if you had a magic wand, and you could build on all of the things we discussed today and heard about, what would 21st century workforce for Kansas look like? And then just a couple of things to follow on to that. What strengths have you been able to see clearly based on what we've talked about today that are prominent now, that are things that exist, assets we have today? And then what elements exist to support the workforce? So what do we have already in our toolkits? What's available to support the workforce? Thinking about getting to that 21st century workforce, what especially is important and achievable for us to carry forward? So take a break, think about those questions. We'll come back together, and then we will, obviously, I think we will wrap up a little bit earlier today than we planned. So when we come back, we'll get back in groups. It looks like most of you are at a table where there's at least 3 people. If you're not, you might want to join a table where there's critical mass to be able to have a conversation. And then we'll talk about in your groups. I'd like you to think about these questions and then have a report out from each of the 3 or each of the tables around these 3 questions. We're going to start over here at this table. They have a detailed list, including graphics. So who wants to tell the story? Okay.
Oh, if you want to. Yeah, great. Okay, here's our beautiful graphics. Not that. Okay, so I'll just touch on the priorities and then the key things that we discussed. So obviously, like the outcome we want, if we could wave our magic wand, is to be like best in the nation, right? Whether it's the state or the local health department level, we all want to be the best. But more specifically, to have more diverse recruiting and like effective recruiting to reflect the populations we serve. Also to be able to hire highly qualified and experienced staff that stick around and don't leave because we can pay them. And so those were kind of the 3 main categories, is like better funded and better able to recruit effectively and then retain. So those are kind of like the 3 big things. And then other key points that were really important, strong leadership support. We had quite a discussion at our table about the need for strong leadership support, and when that isn't there, kind of what happens. And so all the other things related to our strengths, our current strengths come from that strong leadership support that we have. I guess they're enabled, better. For example, one key element is taking risks. We've been able to see and observe that a lot in our agency, is staff are more willing to step outside their comfort zone when they have strong leadership support. So that's just what we came up with. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Very good. Thanks. Who is going to?
Oh, I wrote it, so I better read it. Okay, so do I need to stand up? You can choose. Oh boy. Okay, so our magic wand items would be that significantly more staff would have formal public health education, that we would seriously and sort of all in commit to a vision, whether that's Public Health 3.0 or what have you. Increasing and enhancing public health education for staff. Having the correct educational or experience mix in our departments. teamwork across the state amongst local health departments to ensure continuity of knowledge, skills, and experience as people move on, to make sure that we've got sort of a succession plan there. Jurisdictional sharing, regionalism, or what have you, but a way to sort of pool our resources and recognize your most valuable resources and keep those people engaged. Our strengths, yes, strengths are prominent now. Partnerships and connections, a really mission-driven workforce, and in parts of the state, resources are a big strength, and not so much in other parts of the state. And elements that currently exist to support the workforce, we just kind of talked about groups like this, that we're even having this conversation, that we're able to spend a whole day talking about workforce development, in addition to things like KPHA, APHA. And priorities. So we identified kind of 3 priorities. One would be sort of a 10-year goal of what we want our workforce to look like. What is the appropriate educational and experience mix for those folks? Another goal would be increased jurisdictional sharing, kind of like we talked about, and then pursuing that vision.
Who would like?
Okay, so we looped around a lot and kind of got to all the questions at different points in time. So I'm going to try and read off just a couple of ideas. A couple of things were said that we had kind of underlined and highlighted as key themes or priorities. So I'll try and stick with things that were maybe a little different. But as far as I'm going to start with our prominent strengths now. We just recognize that we actually think it's a strength that we have such a variety of health department sizes that have different focuses that are able to meet different populations. While we recognize that's also a very big challenge, I think that we feel that there's a way that that's also built into our strengths, and that in general, kind of with the elements to support the workforce. And one of our strengths is that there's a clear recognition, and there's a lot of people that have been here today and that are part of other efforts that recognize that this needs to be a continued focus and growth area. So just the recognition and willingness to come to the table through our different associations, and the support that we get from KDHE for different workforce development efforts are really important as far as strengths and elements that support the workforce. Some kind of we weren't really sure how to interpret the top 3 priorities, whether that was our magic wand priorities or priorities based on what currently exists, but definitely the funding and staffing came up. But to support that, building skills around effective communication. We talked a little bit about, for those of you that have seen Dr. Shaw present on the invisibility crisis, we were kind of talking about that idea, which plays into funding and effective collaboration, which was another priority listed, and how do we break down some of those walls and better collaborate. And it kept kind of circling back to that idea of that invisibility crisis, and how do we think about how we communicate and represent public health in a more effective way so we can work on those other bullets. But that is a little bit. Anybody else want to tag in? Okay.
Awesome, very good. Okay. Thank you. And last but not least, the health director's table.
We kind of skipped the whole instructions like we always do, and because we can, we're small in number. But we talked about we would like to have a well-trained and appropriately compensated workforce. We get what we get and we don't throw a fit. And so we have to make do with what we have. And sometimes we have absolutely zero training at all. And sometimes that's even clerically no training at all. So we would like to have that. And we would like to have pared down trainings for entry-level employees. That would be cost effective for small health departments, like short burst trainings to where they're not spending 8 hours to get to a 4-hour training. And maybe that would look like regional trainings or webinars or brown bag trainings. Those are helpful for the nurses. I would like to see maybe if we could do something for clerical or for mid-level or even entry-level people to do those kind of trainings. And then we would like to moving non-public health formally trained people through a public health 101 type training that goes over the 10 essential services and the foundations of public health. And also throw in some trauma-informed training and just a global overall what that looks like. And then looking at tools to aid the local health department directors in training their workforce. And we're thinking more lines of the single-digit workforce and the really super small counties. You know, if you look at the counties up in northwest Kansas that have 1.5 people, but they're still trying to do their jobs. And if, for example, Afton, if she were to come to a training like this is an 8-hour drive for her. That's a day of work just to get to a training, to put a day of training in. And then more than likely her health department is locked when she's here. So it's hard to find resources for her, and it's hard to problem solve that too, but it is real. And you know, we're looking around today going, I wonder where all the health department directors are. And there was 4 of us, I think, here today. But we would also like a template for the services provided. So, and when I say template, that way it's kind of like a shopping cart. If you provide family planning, MCH, and immunizations, then you just need to pick those 3 workforce development plans. But if you have a whole gamut of things you do, then you would go and pick every one of those off the shelf and then have a hybrid of something like that for your entry-level staff so they can still speak to those services. But then make a simple delivery for the public health basic staff, or public health basics for staff, and have that during orientation, but also provide some customer service or some trauma-informed care as well. Having these things developed so we don't have to develop them is huge. Huge help for us. Assistance with avoiding going back to our offices and putting our learned information back on the shelf. So how do we, integrate it into our local health departments? And then as we were talking, we came up with the idea it'd be great, like in a week or so, to have a follow-up webinar or a go-to meeting or something that we could just come back together and like, what did you think about when you were driving home? Or what made sense once you got back into your office, or what didn't work when you got back into your office? Because when I get back to my office, I'm going to be putting fires out. I'm not going to worry about any of this stuff. So, did you have anything, Jason?
I was going to say something where along the lines of Shirley comes up, calls us up and says, hey, get that off your shelf and do something with it.
So when you're talking about the follow-on, you're talking about doing that consistently whenever there's a training to assure that it's absorbed and incorporated and becomes part of the practice. Yeah, okay, that's a great idea. Well, so where we are now. First off, before I forget this, committee members, those of you who are here, if you would please help me. I'd love to capture what's on these sheets in case folks who created them might want to take them with me. So if you're on the committee, if you'd be willing to grab your phone and photograph a couple of those so that we can be sure to capture everything on those. If you're going to leave them with us, that's fine too, but that would be great. So mentioned earlier today that next week, once you go home after KPHA, some of you I know are not staying, but many of you are for the conference. There will be a lot of things I have no doubt you're going to hear over the next couple of days at KPHA that are going to intersect with the things we've talked about today. So you may have some new thoughts, new realizations, new ideas, new ahas. So we'll be sending an electronic kind of survey format, but also where you can incorporate some information, sort of that follow-up that we were just talking about. After you do a training, doing some follow-up to see what has emerged since then, what we may not have thought about today that you think is also important. So please look for that next week. I'd also like to ask everyone, the committee that we have is broad-based, the Workforce Development Committee. There's several people. Raise your hand again if you're a current member of the committee. Council. I keep calling it the committee, sorry. If it's something that you are interested in, quite frankly, it's not an exclusive group. So please let me know, let one of the other persons who just raised their hand know if you're interested in being part of that or having a staff person be part of that. And even more importantly, I think as we look at some of these themes and look at some of the goings forward, we will probably be looking for folks to help be part of work groups to help advance that work. So there will be lots of opportunities. We will make sure that that's part of the survey, that you get to see what you're passionate about, what you might be most interested in supporting going forward. So final thoughts, anyone want to offer any closing comments? Most of you are still smiling. That's a good thing. Okay, all right. Christy, do you want to have anything to say before everyone heads out?
Thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks for those of you who stuck with us, and I think we got some great ideas, and we will take those back to the council and move forward. Thank you.
And how about Chris? Would you like to send us off with some wise words? That'd be great.
I would also just like to thank you for, your time and attention here today. It's been really helpful for me to just be here and to learn from what all you're doing. There's a lot of amazing things going on in the state of Kansas, so just to be able to be part of that is, it means a lot to me. So I'm always so surprised, not surprised, but just people are doing really good work, and a lot of it. So it's just really impressive to hear what you guys are up to. So thank you.
Thanks. Well, thanks, everybody. If you're coming or staying for KPHA, I'll see you there. If not, travel safely going home, and thank you again so much for being here and contributing to this effort. Appreciate your time. Thank you.